Imagine, for just a second, that you are handed the keys to a multi-billion-dollar franchise.
Oh, man.
But the catch is, the vehicle you're driving is currently moving at 100 miles an hour. The script sitting in the passenger seat isn't even finished. And your lead actor is in the back seat completely ad-libbing his lines.
Right. I mean, it sounds less like filmmaking and more like some kind of extreme sport, like a very expensive, highly public extreme sport.
Yeah, exactly. Because back in 2010, Iron Man 2 wasn't just a sequel. It was really the architectural pillar holding up what would, eventually become this massive corporate empire.
Right, the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah. If this movie failed, the entire ACU experiment might have just collapsed before it even really began.
Which is wild to think about now.
Right. But when you look at how it was actually made, I mean, it is an absolute miracle it made it to theaters at all.
Oh, completely.
So for this deep dive, we're going to explore exactly how this movie balanced massive commercial expectations with, complex character studies.
Yeah, and we'll be looking at all the behind-the-scenes chaos, the evolution of the visual effects, and the really surprising real-world drama that shaped it.
Yeah. So we'll start with the script's ambitious thematic origins, transition into the wild casting shakeups, look at the literal heavy lifting of the production, and then, finally break down its massive box office impact.
Sounds good.
So let's get into it. The creative team, led by director Jon Favreau, was under this immense amount of pressure to deliver a hit, and they basically immediately ran into a brick wall regarding where to take Tony Stark's character.
Right, because they needed a central conflict that raised the stakes from the first film.
Yeah.
And, in the comics, the most famous, critically acclaimed storyline for Iron Man is this one called Demon in a Bottle.
Which is pretty heavy, right?
Oh, very heavy.
Yeah.
It deals directly with Tony Stark's severe alcoholism. And during the promotion of the first film, Robert Downey Jr. had actually hinted that this was the natural next step.
I mean, that makes total sense. Stark is aging. He just recklessly outed himself to the world as a superhero, so the sheer stress of that reality is catching up to him.
Exactly. It makes complete narrative sense. It's a deeply human flaw for a guy wrapped in an invincible metal shell. But they didn't go that route.
No, they definitely did not.
Right, so put yourself in a Hollywood boardroom in 2010. The executives were looking at this from a completely different angle, marketing and merchandising.
Of course, the toys.
Yeah, the toys. They were terrified of the demon in a bottle storyline. You simply cannot sell action figures, lunchboxes, and, Halloween costumes to children if the hero's primary antagonist is a bottle of scotch.
Yeah, a gritty real-world issue like severe addiction makes corporate sponsors incredibly nervous, especially when you're trying to build a 4-quadrant summer blockbuster.
Right, so they have this absolute mandate, no alcoholism.
But you still have a main character who is inherently self-destructive.
Right, so how do you give him a crisis without making the toy companies pull their contracts?
Which is quite the puzzle.
It is, and this is where Shane Black comes into the picture. He's a writer and director who actually later took over the franchise for the third film. But here he was, just offering script advice.
Okay, so what was his fix?
He suggested a really brilliant pivot. He told them to model Tony Stark's internal depression, not on addiction, but on J. Robert Oppenheimer.
Oh, wow. The physicist who led the Manhattan Project.
Precisely. A man who creates this technological marvel, only to realize he has permanently changed the fabric of warfare and become, a destroyer of worlds.
Right.
So Black suggested shifting the dread from something chemical, like alcohol, to something existential. So instead of a drinking problem, Stark discovers that the arc reactor in his chest, the very thing keeping him alive, is slowly poisoning his blood with palladium.
Wow. Okay, that's such an interesting shift. It's like the CEO of a massive tech startup who secretly knows the company is going bankrupt, but he still has to walk out on stage under the bright lights and smile for the investors every single day.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah.
He's completely trapped by his own success. But hold on, I have to ask about the logic of those executives for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
If a studio is so incredibly worried about toy sales that they veto an alcohol plot, isn't it ironically much darker to model your fun flying superhero after the man who created the atomic bomb?
I mean, on a purely thematic level, yeah, it is absolutely darker. It deals with mortality, legacy, and, the capacity for mass destruction.
Right.
But in Hollywood terms, it is about the specific type of darkness that is marketable. Palladium poisoning is a fictional sci-fi ailment. It doesn't actually exist in the real world.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it allows the filmmakers to explore that deep self-destruction and existential dread. Having Stark act recklessly, push his friends away, feel his time running out while keeping the surface-level action perfectly palatable.
So it's like a safe container for very real emotions.
Exactly. It bridges the gap between a breezy superhero romp and a true character crisis, without ever alarming the people making the merchandise.
A sci-fi sickness as a loophole for character depth? That is fascinating. But while Stark was desperately trying to replace his failing arc reactor core on screen, the production was dealing with some massive replacement issues of its own behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah. The most public of which was the recasting of James Rhodey Rhodes, Tony Stark's best friend.
Right, because Terrence Howard played him in the first film, and then suddenly Don Cheadle is wearing the uniform in the sequel.
And the behind-the-scenes reality of that swap is intense.
Ah,
Terrence Howard was actually the highest-paid actor on the first Iron Man film.
really? The highest paid?
Yeah, higher than Robert Downey Jr. at the time.
Yeah.
And he later claimed that when it came time for the sequel, the studio offered him a fraction of what was supposedly in his original contract.
Wow. That's a huge pay cut.
Yeah, according to his account, they basically told him the second movie would be successful with or without him, and he was pushed out over those salary disputes.
And what did Marvel say?
Marvel, for their part, chose not to comment publicly on the negotiations at the time.
Which leaves this massive vacuum for a pivotal character right as the moving vehicle is picking up speed. And the way Don Cheadle entered the picture sounds incredibly stressful.
Oh, it was. Cheadle literally got a phone call when he was at his kid's laser tag party.
You're kidding.
No, a laser tag party. And the studio gave him only a few hours to accept the role. And keep in mind, this wasn't just a guest spot. They were asking him to sign a massive six-picture deal.
That is wild. I mean, you were standing in a laser tag arena, and you have a couple of hours to commit a decade of your life to a character without even knowing what the storyline for this specific movie is going to be.
Exactly. And he immediately had to deal with the physical reality of the role, too. When he arrived on set, Cheadle was put into a practical armor suit that weighed around 50 pounds.
50 pounds.
Yeah, it was so restrictive he couldn't even reach up to touch his own face. But, he brought this very grounded, exasperated energy to Rhodey, which really anchored the character's relationship with the increasingly erratic Tony Stark.
Well, he definitely pulled it off. But Cheadle wasn't the only actor navigating this massive, chaotic machine. You had incoming actors resorting to some pretty extreme measures just to secure their spot in the franchise, like Scarlett Johansson, for instance.
Right. She was brought in to play Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. And she actually dyed her hair red before she even landed the part.
Really? Just on speculation?
Yeah, just banking on the hope that if Jon Favreau saw her looking the part, it would convince him to cast her over the other contenders.
Wow. And obviously it worked, and she became a central pillar of the Avengers. But looking back at her debut in this specific movie is kind of jarring compared to where she ends up, isn't it?
It really is. Johansson actually reflected on this during the promotion of her solo Black Widow film years later. She pointed out that in Iron Man 2, the character is heavily hypersexualized.
Oh, definitely.
Her introduction involves Tony Stark looking up lingerie photos of her and treating her almost like a possession in his dialogue.
Yeah, it's pretty glaring now.
And she noted that, as a younger actress, she might have felt it was meant as a compliment at the time. But looking back, she was deeply grateful that the portrayal of the character, and really the industry's whole approach to female superheroes, evolved into something much more positive and agency-driven as the franchise matured.
It's a huge contrast for sure. But, if we are talking about actors making intense choices to leave a mark on this movie, Mickey Rourke is in a league of his own.
Oh, absolutely. He was cast as Ivan Vanko, the villain Whiplash. And Rourke wanted to ensure Vanko wasn't just a generic one-dimensional bad guy. He wanted the audience to see a human being, something redeemable, beneath the revenge plot.
And the lengths he went to are just staggering. To research playing a Russian physicist who had been in the Gulag, Rourke actually flew out and visited the Butyrka prison in Moscow.
Which is incredible dedication.
Yeah, and he suggested that half of his dialogue shouldn't even be in English but in Russian. And here's the detail I just still can't get over. He used his own money to buy his character's gold teeth, and he bought the live cockatoo that his character carries around.
Yeah, his own money. He even had a tattoo applied for the character that read Loki, which was the name of his real-life dog that had recently passed away.
Oh, that's kind of sweet, actually.
It is, though. The studio actually had to spend money to digitally remove that tattoo in post-production.
Wait, really? Why?
Kevin Feige was worried audiences would see the word Loki and think it was a tie-in to the Marvel character Loki, who was about to be introduced in the Thor movie.
Oh my gosh, of course. Brand confusion, but okay, I have to push back on this whole situation with Rourke.
Sure. What's up?
Rourke almost walked away from this movie entirely because Marvel initially offered him a reported $250,000, which is a massive lowball for a primary villain in a sequel to a mega hit.
It really was a lowball offer.
Yeah. So why on earth would an actor spend his own money on gold teeth and a live bird for a movie with a $170 million budget? I mean, why subsidize a major studio's props department?
It seems totally contradictory, right?
Yeah.
But look at the underlying mechanism of what's happening here. This chaotic ensemble, a recast best friend thrust into a six-picture deal, a super spy dyeing her hair to get noticed, and a deeply method villain buying his own props. It perfectly mirrors the reality of the Marvel Cinematic Universe at that exact moment.
How do you mean?
These actors weren't just showing up, reading lines, and going home. They were fiercely trying to stake their claims and maintain creative ownership inside a rapidly expanding corporate machine. Rourke buying that bird is really a physical manifestation of an artist trying to hold on to his character's identity when the studio is primarily worried about the release date.
Writing your own character traits while the machine is running, that makes a lot of sense. Which I guess explains the most infamous part of this production, the script itself, or rather, the lack of one.
Yeah, the on-set improvisation. Robert Downey Jr. is famous for his ability to ad-lib, and Favreau encouraged a very loose, spontaneous environment.
That sounds incredibly fun for the actors. But for the screenwriter, Justin Theroux, it was an absolute nightmare.
A total nightmare, yeah.
Let's just think about the mechanics of this. Writing a script around an actor who improvises is like trying to tailor a bespoke suit for a guy who is actively running a marathon. The measurements keep changing every 5 minutes. Theroux had to do what he called writing gymnastics.
Right, because every change has a butterfly effect. If Downey Jr. improvises a joke in a morning scene that completely changes Tony Stark's motivation, the writer has to frantically rewrite the pages for the afternoon scene and the scene they're shooting next week so that the plot points actually connect and the movie makes logical sense.
That sounds exhausting.
It breaks the structural math of screenwriting entirely.
Yeah, and the cognitive overload of doing that day after day was so intense that Theroux's back physically gave out. I mean, the sheer stress of trying to hold the narrative together literally left the writer bedridden during production.
It really underscores the physical toll of manufacturing a cohesive blockbuster narrative on the fly. You are dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of crew members waiting for pages, and this immovable release date set by the studio.
Right. Shooting a massive blockbuster with that much improv sounds like trying to lay down the tracks while the train is already at full speed.
That's exactly what it was.
And while Theroux was desperately trying to build the story, the visual effects team was figuring out how to build Iron Man himself all over again.
Yeah, because the first film relied heavily on practical, physical suits built by the legendary Stan Winston. They looked incredible, but they were incredibly cumbersome.
Yeah, Cheadle's 50-pound suit is proof of that. You can't exactly do a nimble, dynamic superhero landing in 50 pounds of fiberglass and metal without looking pretty stiff.
Exactly. So for Iron Man 2, cinematographer Matthew Lubatique and VFX supervisor Ben Snow made a major transition.
What did they do?
They moved primarily to computer-generated imagery. They used what the crew called football suits.
Ball suits.
Yeah, the actors would wear just the chest plate, the helmet, and maybe some arm gauntlets. Everything from the waist down or, the intricate moving parts was filled in digitally by industrial light and magic.
Oh, wow. And for the big action set pieces, like the massive chase sequence on the racetrack in Monaco, the suit was entirely digital. A studio called Double Negative handled that.
Right.
But I have to ask, does this fundamental shift from practical metal to CGI change the visual language of the movie? I mean, do we lose something in that transition?
It's the core debate of modern cinema, really.
Hmm.
The technical advantage is massive CGI allows for impossible action. A practical suit physically limits a stunt double. You just cannot have a guy in heavy fiberglass getting smashed into cars on a Monaco racetrack and have it look survivable.
Right, that makes sense.
CGI gives you that fluid, dynamic movement, but you do risk losing tactile realism, the way actual sunlight bounces off physical metal, or, the feeling of weight when a character takes a heavy step.
It creates this really strange paradox. Tony Stark's technology is framed as the brilliant invention of a solitary genius in his basement. I mean, the cinematographer even described the suit design as intelligent and classic.
Yet the reality of creating that solitary genius required a literal army. The filmmakers had to rely on 11 different digital effects studios to make it look real.
11. That's insane.
Yeah. ILM alone created over 500 shots. And another studio, Perception, was brought in specifically to craft all the transparent smartphones, the intricate holographic lab environments, and the digital backdrops for the Stark Expo.
It's a huge operation, but they still built some massive physical sets to anchor all that digital work, right? Like for the Stark Expo, they didn't just use a soundstage.
No, they went big.
They went to the Sepulveda Dam in Los Angeles, stacked hundreds of actual shipping containers, covered them in plywood and plaster, and then painted the entire massive structure green to serve as an interactive backdrop. The scale is just mind-boggling.
And all of that, the physical construction, the 11 VFX studios, the frantic rewrites, the method acting, was barreling toward a hard release date.
Which brings us to how the world actually received this chaotic experiment, because for all the back injuries, the salary disputes, and the pet cockatoos, the movie delivered where the studio needed it to. It was an enormous financial success.
Huge. It grossed over $623.9 million globally. It set IMAX records at the time, completely outperforming the opening weekend of the first film.
Right. And the corporate landscape was shifting right beneath it, too. Paramount Pictures distributed the film and took an 8% cut of the revenue, but Disney had just purchased Marvel for $4 billion, meaning they were now steering the ship.
Yeah, that was a massive shift.
And this movie was the crucial puzzle piece for what they called Phase 1 of the MCU.
It was busy planting seeds for the future everywhere. Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury gets significant screen time, laying the groundwork for the Avengers. But the moment that truly ignited the fan base was the post-credits scene.
Oh, definitely. SHIELD agent Phil Coulson drives out to a crater in the New Mexico desert, and sitting in the center of it is Thor's hammer.
Yeah, and that scene was actually directed by Kenneth Branagh, who was in the middle of directing the standalone Thor movie.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it wasn't just a fun Easter egg, it was a promise to the audience. It was the studio explicitly stating that a much larger interconnected universe was imminent.
And the world building is so fluid that they even alter it retroactively, which is wild.
Oh, the kid at the expo.
Yes. There is a famous scene at the Stark Expo where a little boy wearing an Iron Man mask bravely stands his ground against a rogue hammer drone right before the real Iron Man lands behind him and blasts it. 7 years later, when John Watts was directing Spider-Man Homecoming, he pitched an idea to Kevin Feige. He suggested that, timeline-wise, that brave little kid in Queens could officially be a young Peter Parker.
And Feige loved the idea. Tom Holland confirmed it in interviews, and just like that, it became canon. It perfectly illustrates how malleable the mythology of the MCU is. They can look back at a fun, throwaway moment and seamlessly weave it into the emotional core of a brand new franchise.
It's so clever. But despite the massive box office and the brilliant world building, the critical reception at the time was surprisingly polarized.
It was. The general audiences were highly satisfied, though. They graded it with an A cinema score right out of the theater, matching the first film. And influential critics like Roger Ebert gave it a very positive 3 out of 4 stars, calling it a polished sequel elevated by Downey Jr.'s quirky performance.
But then you have the other side of the spectrum. Critics like Kirk Honeycutt at The Hollywood Reporter were pretty harsh. He argued that everything fun and fresh about the original had vanished, replaced by noise, confusion, too many villains, and misguided storylines.
Right.
It feels like this movie was forced into an impossible position. It had to serve 2 masters simultaneously. It needed to be a satisfying, intimate sequel to Tony Stark's personal journey, but it also had to function as a 2-hour giant commercial for the upcoming Avengers universe. Did the narrative buckle under the weight of its own franchise ambitions?
That is the central tension of the entire Marvel model. If you analyze Iron Man 2 purely as a standalone narrative, it is undeniably overstuffed.
Definitely.
It is trying to juggle Stark's existential dread, the introduction of Black Widow, the world building of SHIELD, and 2 separate villains. But what is truly fascinating is that it proved a theoretical concept, which that sheer momentum and a charismatic lead can carry a film to massive cultural and financial success, even if the script is flawed. Did it buckle? Narratively, it sagged under its own weight. But structurally, for the studio, it held firm. It proved the audience would show up for the universe, not just the individual character. It was the ultimate stress test.
The ultimate stress test. I love that. Let's pull all of this together. We've explored how corporate panic over merchandising shifted a hero's internal crisis from gritty alcoholism to a sci-fi metaphor for atomic dread.
We sure have.
We looked at the wild realities of the casting, from actors being swapped out and signing blind contracts at laser tag parties to villains buying their own props just to leave a creative fingerprint.
Yeah, the cockatoo.
The cockatoo, exactly. We dug into the physical toll of a heavily improvised production, where a writer was literally bedridden from the stress of connecting the dots, and where 11 different digital studios had to labor to create the illusion of physical weight. And finally, we saw how it weathered mixed reviews to successfully lay the foundation for a billion-dollar empire.
It really strips away the polished veneer of blockbuster filmmaking and shows you the frantic human machinery underneath.
It really does. It reminds us that the biggest, sleekest cultural products are rarely the result of a serene, perfectly planned, creative process. Behind the curtain, they are almost always held together by sheer willpower, frantic late-night rewrites, and a staggering amount of improvisation.
A moving vehicle being built while it's being driven.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder on your own. In the world of film criticism, we talk endlessly about the evils of studio interference.
Oh, constantly.
We criticize executives for meddling in the creative process, like when they vetoed the compelling demon in the bottle storyline just to protect toy sales. We instinctively view corporate oversight as the enemy of art.
Right, that's the standard view.
But when you look at the raw reality of Iron Man 2, considering the physical breakdown of a screenwriter trying to manage endless on-set ad-libs and the sheer chaos of actors rewriting their own characters with their own money, is it possible that sometimes strict corporate guardrails and immovable release dates are the only things that keep a massive, sprawling creative experiment from completely collapsing in on itself?
It is a deeply uncomfortable question for anyone who champions pure artistic freedom, but honestly, an absolute vital one to ask.
Something to think about the next time you see a CGI superhero stick a perfect weightless landing. Until next time, keep diving deep.